Life as a parent is nonstop. I'm so focused on keeping my family healthy that I barely have time to take care of myself. If this sounds like you, then you need to give Symbiotica a try. Symbiotica is a health and wellness company that empowers individuals to take ownership of their health with high-quality formulas and supplements crafted to boost energy, immunity, gut health, and more. Symbiotica supplements are made with clean, natural ingredients, and they don't contain any toxins or artificial ingredients. Because they were designed for us, busy parents. They're quick and easy to take. Just a daily dose for your energy, immune system, and overall well-being. It's made staying consistent so much easier. And the best part? Symbiotica is having their holiday sale, so now's the perfect time to put your health in the driver's seat. Head to Symbiotica.com for 20% off with code GIFT20. That's CYMBIOTIKA.com with code GIFT20 for 20% off. Your health transformation journey starts now. Symbiotica Natural and Organic Supplements.
Tom Herman is out, Steve Sarkisian is in, and the Longhorns will look to find new beginnings with a new head coach down there in Austin. Welcome in here to the 10 of 12 podcast. I am your host, Ryan Gilbert. Today here on the show, it's all about Texas. We'll be talking Texas football, be talking about the firing of Tom Herman, as well as the hiring of Coach Steve Sarkisian. Taylor Estes from Horns 24/7 will be joining us to talk about this. We've got a lot to get into, what went wrong for Tom Herman, what you can expect from Steve Sarkisian, as well as a little basketball discussion at the very end of this podcast. It's been crazy. It's been a roller coaster of emotions, it feels like, for Tom Herman over the last 4 seasons down there in Austin. Of course, never lost a bowl game, never had a losing season in the Big 12 Conference, but ultimately it just simply wasn't enough to get the job done down there in Austin. We'll bring in Taylor here from Horns 24/7. First of all, Taylor, thank you so much for taking time with us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for taking time with us. We'll start it off here with Texas football. Before we get into Tom Herman, Coach Steve Sarkisian, all that stuff, let's talk about the football team just as a whole here on the season. What are your initial takeaways before the bowl game, the regular season, how they performed?
You know, I think that this was one of the first years where I kind of understood why Texas fans were so disappointed and were moaning and groaning a little bit about how the team was performing. You know, there's no denying that the Texas fan base can be a very prideful fan base, and, you know, losing is unacceptable in many fans' minds. You know, it's almost as if every year they're supposed to be playing for a title, and that may not always be realistic. But, you know, this season was the year that has been continued to be pointed to from Tom Herman and people at Texas as being the season where Texas would be competing for championships. And heading into 2020, you know, the Longhorns had one of the more experienced rosters, returning to the team in the Big 12, one of the more talented rosters probably in the Big 12. And, you know, this appeared to kind of be a down year in the conference, with Oklahoma, you know, being, I know, you know, in hindsight, obviously they hadn't won the Big 12 title, but, you know, they seemed entered the year kind of down. So this was the year Tom Herman kept pointing to as the one that Texas was going to really turn that corner. And, you know, the losses to TCU and Oklahoma early in the year really made people question Tom Herman, you know, as a coach and everything. And for the first time, I really did really felt that Texas fans had a right to feel that way this year. And I've never been one that says that. I've always been, you know, the type of person that thinks like if you think that they're going to win every single year the national championship, like that's not feasible. You know what I mean? So this was, though, the time that, you know, I think Texas really had such a disappointing season, and that sounds weird. And, you know, when you hear a record of 7-3, but still, when this has been for 4 years straight talked about as when Texas would compete, I think that there's reason why Texas fans were really disappointed.
So I guess you kind of already answered this question for me, but when I saw this team here in Manhattan against Kansas State, and then also, you know, on TV against Colorado in the bowl game, they looked pretty good. The guys that were there appeared to be bought in. and, kind of were in support of Tom Herman as their coach. They're playing for their coach, So I guess, does the first half of the season where they lose those games to TCU in Oklahoma, does that outweigh the final two games? And really, is that what kind of went into this decision to fire him?
There was a lot of things that went into the decision. And this sounds weird, but actually a lot of it had to do with things that were off the field. The search for Urban Meyer following the Oklahoma game, that really kicked into gear after the photo of Sam Ehlinger was shown in the Cotton Bowl doing the Eyes of Texas alone. And the optics surrounding that, a lot of big money donors at Texas were very disappointed in. Some were very outraged about it, thinking that it was a horrible public display of what the university is, especially after a 4 overtime loss, and so that was really when Tom Herman's job came into significant question. And it wasn't about the loss. It really was about kind of how he was, Tom Herman, the leader, more so than Tom Herman, the football coach. Once Urban Meyer, when he turned down the Texas job, a lot of people thought that Tom Herman would come back. I think Chris Del Conte, the Texas athletic director, he put out a statement that was kind of in support of Tom Herman. And I think that a lot of people believe that he would be the coach. But again, it really had to do with a lot of off the field things that led to his demise. But the reality is, had those losses not happened, we wouldn't be having these conversations. If you win, winning cures all. And so that, both definitely played a role into it. But, at the end of the season, a source told Horns 24/7 following the Alamo Bowl game, my coworker Chip Brown asked, this is a Texas official, high-ranking Texas, booster person, who he asked, has the Alamo Bowl win impacted Tom Herman's fate? And the response was, who did we play again? And so that right there just kind of showed that game really had no bearing on Tom Herman's fate at that point.
Interesting stuff. So Urban Meyer, that was a real thing for a while, just to confirm, because I didn't follow this as closely as you did. What was the whole deal with that? When did it officially kind of go away, so to speak?
So, yeah, it definitely was a thing. There was interest expressed, and Urban, there's a lot of reasons why he has been kind of weighing his options on if he wants to return to college coaching. Texas would be a spot that he probably would consider. From everything that we were hearing, it was Texas, USC, and Notre Dame would be the schools that he would consider, at least listening to what they had to say if he wanted to return to a college coaching gig. So there were plenty of conversations, but at the end of the day, Urban officially turned Texas down at the beginning. I believe it was around the 1st of December or so, around that time, that Horns 24/7 was the one that reported that he officially said no. So there was actually a lot of interest there. It just ended up being, I think that with Urban Meyer, he just doesn't really want to deal with the transfer portal, was one thing that we heard a lot about. And then he has, some health issues that is a concern for his family. So, the stress of being a college coach, especially at a place like Texas with health issues, and then also having to worry about the transfer portal, was just something that made him decide not to take the job.
If this wasn't Texas and it was just another Power 5 school where the standard maybe isn't as high as it is down there in Austin, do you think Tom Herman still gets fired?
That's a good question, because I think that it's kind of difficult to compare. It's kind of like comparing apples and oranges, because there are certain things in, the state of Texas that people are very proud of. And that's the Eyes of Texas, their school's song. And when Tom Herman just kind of had like an very open disrespect to his boss, essentially, and not, telling the players to stay on the field, just for the Eyes of Texas. They didn't have to sing it. They didn't have to put their horns up or anything. They just needed to at least show a united front. He couldn't get the team to do that. And so I'm not really sure if there's a comparable thing from another school, if there's something like that would be, so important to a fan base that would really weigh it. But if there is, then, I still think that Tom Herman, so the off the field, they're concerned over him as the leader of the football program more so than the coach of the football program. I think there could be other places where he would not have survived this year.
I remember a few years back I was in Stillwater, and I saw that game where Herman and Gundy kind of at the end of it were shouting some choice words. I don't know if you remember that one, but is that kind of just a nutshell of what happened? I mean, I think I saw you on Twitter saying something about, the parents of the players were a little upset, some of the locker room issues. Was it called, not just this one incident with the Eyes of Texas, but overall, was this kind of just the icing on the cake?
Yeah, it really was. He, the thing that's really interesting, and I've told this, a lot since he was fired, Tom Herman at one point was the guy that the big money donors really, really wanted. When Charlie Strong was the head coach in 2016, there was very substantial reporting that made it seem like Tom Herman may be hired by LSU before LSU hired Ed Orgeron. And that's when Texas swooped in at the last minute and hired Tom Herman to replace Charlie Strong. So he had a lot of support from, the administration at Texas. But he kind of, once he got there, kind of shoved his nose a little bit at them and didn't really try to not necessarily even like cozy up to, Texas officials or big money supporters or anything, but just even acknowledge them. And at a school like Texas, I think that a lot of the big money at Texas probably is a little bit spoiled because they had Mac Brown for so many years, and Mac was so, made it such a priority to have those big money relationships. And so he, would even have cell phones for a certain level of donors that they could contact Mac, individually. And so that's what a lot of the big money at Texas is used to. And to have a coach come in and not even try, that was a strike number one. And then there's, things that are embarrassing that happened whether it was in 2017, the Texas Bowl when he was mocking Missouri's quarterback for this, kind of like touchdown, secure the bag dance. And, that's a bad look on Texas there, and there was a lot of former players and sources close to Texas that told us that Tom wouldn't acknowledge players when he would see them in the football facilities and things like that. And then, as you mentioned, the Mike Gundy thing, that was another deal. And then in last year, 2019, the early signing period, he gets seen on camera flipping off LHN cameras on signing day. And I mean, it's just like there's been one thing after another. So, it definitely was not just this year. I think this year was, as you mentioned, kind of just the icing on the cake.
As you look back and reflect on, I guess, his time at Texas, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here. What would you give him as far as just a letter grade goes when it's all said and done? I mean, he won 4 bowl games, never had a losing season. But like you said, all those antics and issues, what would you give him as far as the grade goes?
I would say Tom Herman, the football coach, I would probably give like a C+, and I'm a little bit more realistic, I think, when it comes to what the University of Texas football program is. The Mac Brown days were the glory years, but there hasn't been a ton of success, consistently in the program. There's just been large gaps of championships and stuff. So I think that the expectations are really, really high for anybody who takes over the job. And I don't think that he failed as the football coach. I would say maybe like a C+, B-. But I would say as Tom Herman, the leader, I have to give him an F. I mean, honestly, it's a very unique situation. I had not heard a lot of the things that I heard during his tenure at Texas from, the player standpoint. You're not ever always going to be everybody's like best friend or anything like that, but like to not acknowledge your own players when you walk past them in the facility and they say hi to you and you just walk by like, no, they don't even exist. I mean, that right there is not necessarily somebody who is a successful leader of young men. And so for that, those type of things, I think it's hard to give him a passing grade at all.
Let's switch gears now to Coach Sark. What are your just kind of first initial thoughts and reactions to that hire?
I think that it was very surprising, to be honest. It happened really fast too. I mean, I think as quick as it seemed from the public standpoint of how quick that seemed to go down, it actually was that quick. And so, I think that there's, a lot of reason to be excited for him. If you're a Texas fan, I think, he's done really well as offensive coordinator at Alabama. I mean, I know a lot of people, kind of point to his previous issues with, going to rehab and stuff that happened at USC that led to his firing there. But, the way I look at it is Nick Saban is is going to be one of the best college football coaches in the history of the sport. And I don't see Nick Saban keeping somebody on staff and, giving him a position to call his offense or, even step in as an interim head coach when Nick was out. I don't see him doing that to somebody who has, continued issues. And so I think he deserves, I believe in second chances for people. And I think that there's no reason not to give him the benefit of the doubt from that standpoint. And, he was kind of an up and coming coach when prior to he got, his firing at USC. People point to his record, at Washington, but you have to remember he took over a Washington football program that was 0-11 when he took over. And I believe that they were 9 and 25 or something in the 3 years prior to him taking over the program. So while the win-loss record, the percentage may not look great, I mean, he really rebuilt that Washington football program before he took the USC job. So I think you kind of have to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I think that Texas fans need to be really patient, honestly, though. And that's something that's not, a common word in a lot of Texas fans, vocabulary. But I think they have to be. You can't just turn into the school that keeps firing head coaches. And he was given a 6-year deal, as we reported at Horns 24/7 last week. And I think that you got to just give him the time to really ride it out. So I think that there's reason to be optimistic. However, I think anytime you're taking a coach who hasn't been a head coach for several years, you're taking a risk. So maybe just have some I think it's cautiously optimistic would be the right way that I would explain it right now with Steve Sarkisian.
If you're a school like Texas, you almost have first dibs to any coach in the entire country when you're going through a hiring process. Do you think that this was the best option for the Longhorns?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that of course there's definitely other people that would be considered a quote unquote better option, but it's more so the coaches that are available. I mean, let's be honest, is Texas going to hire Dabo Swinney away from Clemson? No. Are they going to hire Nick Saban from Alabama? No. Yeah. I mean, there's just, those type of coaches. Sure, you could probably sit there and say that they are much better, of a quality of a candidate to take over a job like Texas. But from, what was available, I think that this is a good hire for what was available. I was a little surprised, to be honest, that the Texas officials were willing to buy out Tom Herman and his staff's contracts, though, to hire, a coach that wasn't in a current sitting head coaching role. If it was just a normal year, that would be chump change, at the school like Texas. But $25 million buyouts during, a global pandemic where the athletic department's already taken a huge hit and publicly doesn't look great because they had to lay off a lot of people in the summer because of COVID. So, I think that was a little bit more surprising than anything, that they felt that, Steve Sarkisian was worth that buyout. But I think that more so just shows how much faith was lost in Tom Herman more so than anything else.
If you had to put an over-under on how many years Sark will last at Texas, what would you put that at? In my eyes, it's almost like it's like in the 3 or 4 year range, and he's gone, or he's going to be there for double-digit years, and he's very successful. I feel like there's not much of a middle ground there. Would you agree with that?
I agree. Yeah, I think that's probably safe. I don't know if that's the right approach, but yeah. Just with the way that Texas has kind of handled the turnover, especially at the the head coaching position in the football program and stuff. I think that it's hard to give them the benefit of the doubt to think that they're going to let Sarkisian really kind of have what Shaka Smart has had, where he got to play out his entire contract, and then see kind of what the future holds from him from there. I think that's probably pretty rare. So yeah, I think probably 3-4 would be the right one. And I agree, if he makes it past that, it may be more of a coach of the future type of situation.
Is he going to be starting from scratch essentially, or is there going to be a good, residue of toughness back next season for the Longhorns?
And, there is a lot of young talent at Texas. There's definitely going to be positions that will be a little bit of a question mark. I mean, quarterback is, number one with Sam Ehlinger going to the NFL. Casey Thompson took over for Sam Ehlinger, his backup, in the Alamo Bowl when Ehlinger left with a shoulder injury. And Casey played really well, to his credit, and he came off the bench. He really hasn't had much quality playing time. So while I think that it's I think it was a positive sign and should give Texas fans a little bit more hope and not so much of worry for the future since they've seen Casey, really take control of a game. However, that was, I'm not trying to be mean to Colorado, but it's not like that's a team that was setting the world on fire either,
Yeah.
So, you have to be realistic when it comes to those deals. But I think that still should be a concern. If he continues to play the way he did in the Alamo Bowl, then they have a solid option at quarterback in the future. But one game doesn't define a player, so I think that that's a big question for Steve Sarkisian. But he's an offensive-minded coach. If the one thing you can't really question is how well he is able to really formulate an offense, and he's supposed to be the play caller at Texas too. So I think you give him the benefit of the doubt there. They'll lose Joseph Osai, who was one of the top defensive end / linebacker. He played the jack position in Chris Ash's defense. They're going to have to replace him, and that's a huge loss. But that was kind of known. That's nobody really expected Osai to come back for next year. And then we're reporting that Texas should return some of the offensive linemen. So I think that's a good, starting point at least. But the offensive line at Texas was kind of up and down this year. So I think it's going to take a lot of coaching there. But, I think overall there's enough talent, on the roster. It's more a matter of how it's going to fit and how they kind of put it all together. But I think that, this is not him taking over an 0-11 type of Washington program or anything like that. I would say that the amount of talent that they have, that he will have this year, is probably comparable to what Tom Herman inherited in 2017.
This just popped into my head real quick. Quinn Ewers, he had decommitted from Texas, and one of the highly, I think he was he the highest rated prospect in his class? What happened with that? Did he pretty much know that Herman wasn't going to be back, or how did that all go down?
From what we had heard, honestly, it kind of sounds crazy again, but from what we had heard was, Quinn Ewers grew up a big Texas fan. He grew up in the state. He rooted for Texas. He always wanted to play there. It was a dream school. And then when he saw the situation of Sam Ehlinger being on the field alone, doing the Eyes of Texas, and just how poorly that reflected on the school, I think that really made him second guess if that's the place where he wanted to be, just because of how bad that looked, for the starting quarterback, especially after that game. So that played a huge role in him decommitting from Texas and then ultimately, committing to Ohio State. But I think that's something that, Steve Sarkisian should probably put it as priority number one, even though he is committed to Ohio State. This kid literally grew up the biggest Texas fan. He literally has had Texas as a dream school for him ever since he was a little kid. So I think that there might be a way, if there is a way for Steve Sarkisian to kind of get back in the door with Quinn Ewers, I think that should be a huge priority for them.
Feels like everyone's leaving and going into the transfer portal. So if you're a Texas fan, you're just
you never
hoping
know
that'll
what's
happen
available,
with him.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Going up, the previous question though, would you rather, Sark recruit talent or the guys that he really thinks is the best, fit for his program? Obviously, like I said, with the coaching search, you've almost got first dibs at Texas. Would you rather them get those 5-star prospects or simply, who he thinks is the best fit for his team?
I think that it's always going to be an important thing to try to get the best talent in the state of Texas if you're the head football coach at the University of Texas. And that hasn't always been the case. You're seeing those guys go and play for Ohio State and Alabama, or Clemson or whatever it may be. I think that you should always make that a priority because that's going to be something that high school football coaches in the state of Texas are going to be endearing to more so than if, they're not even trying to get in with even their big guys, So I think there's kind of, you have to weigh it a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's about what works, and I know that a lot of Texas fans would disagree with me, that you don't always need all of the 5 stars if it doesn't, it's not a position for them. Because as, we've talked about the transfer portal, that's a big deal. Players can leave at any time. And, with the new transfer rule, the one-time transfer rule, you have to make sure that you get guys that are going to play and stay, a little bit. And so I think that you have to kind of weigh it a little bit, but I think you definitely want to try to at least get the best talent in the state of Texas to listen to the University of Texas. That'll help for the long-time future. But overall, it's about what works.
Wrapping things up with football before we switch gears to basketball for just a sec. Do we need to schedule a Zoom for 4 years from now to be talking about the firing of Coach Sark?
Gosh, you know what? I hope not, for his sake. I think that, it's such a crazy business. A college, head coaching business is just so nuts nowadays that I understand why there's a lot of people who would want, early change if these coaches are making, $6 million a year, whatever it may be. But like at some point it's, you don't want to be the coaching turnover school either, where people go and, their careers go to die, because that's not going to help in the future. But it's hard not to wonder, if he doesn't win early, if we wouldn't be having this conversation, in 4 years. But I'd say hopefully for all of our sanity's sake that cover this program, and for Steve Sarkisian, that we will not be having that conversation.
Gotcha. Last thing for you, with regards to the basketball program, they're playing some really good basketball down there in Austin. I watch them a lot on TV. They're really impressive to me. What are your just kind of overall thoughts from that team?
I mean, they're off to a really solid start, and I think that the thing that I like the most in this year that I haven't seen in years, recent years at Texas, is this is a team that seems to be playing more for each other and more together, than in years past. Before they used to have kind of just like one and done guys under Shaka, and it just never seemed like a really true team cohesiveness since he arrived at Texas. But I think that looks a little bit different this year. I mean, I believe it was against, Iowa State? There was one game recently where when Texas won, and, their number one guy, Greg Brown, probably the one and done for Texas, he only had, I think it was like 8 points. I can't remember if it was Iowa State, Kansas, or West Virginia is one of those ones. But, he didn't really play very well, but Texas still was able to win. And I think that's, a good sign. If like your best player doesn't, perform up to par, you still win games against top opponents. I mean, that's a good sign of a well kind of coached team. And I think that's what you're seeing in Texas right now.
I'll be honest here. I've never been a big fan of Shaka Smart, but I think it's really hard to deny what he's doing this season. Certainly wish him the best. Taylor, I appreciate you taking time with me. Where can anyone follow you on Twitter and check out the stuff you guys do over on Horns 24/7?
Oh, yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Taylor Estes 247, and then you can go over to horns247.com for all of the latest with Steve Sarkisian and his new staff and everything going on at Texas.
There you have it, Taylor Estes from Horns 24/7. If you are subscribed to GoPowercat.com, you've got the access to everything they do over at Horns 24/7. Taylor and her crew do a great job. Other than that, though, I'm Ryan Gilbert. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
With Blue Link Plus, you can access your Hyundai Tucson Limited remotely. Doors unlocked, temperature set, lost car found.
There it is.
Get complimentary class-leading Blue Link Plus. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details.